Hey guys, welcome to Thrive Bites Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Colin Zhu, and thank you so much for listening on. You could have been anywhere in the world and you decided to spend just a few moments of your precious time, and we greatly appreciate it. Here on the podcast, we talk about three things: living a plant-powered lifestyle, enhancing emotional resilience, and creating a thriving mindset. And I interview a range of passionate guests such as physicians, dietitians, coaches, entrepreneurs, and many more. And please join me as I deliver these engaging, informative, and high-valued conversations for you. So what are you waiting for? Come on inside. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Thrive Bites Podcast. I cannot wait for you guys to listen for today's show. Today, we have the famous Chuck Carroll, the weight loss champion himself, and also the host of The Exam Room by PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And we talk about all things health, weight loss, one's journey to be able to lose it and then stay off. And what is the horizons that we're looking for? How can we sift through this amount of mis and disinformation of health education and awareness in our atmosphere today, and more to come. So you don't want to miss this, and I'll see you guys inside. All right, guys. Well, welcome to another episode of Thrive Bites Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Colin Zhu, and thank you so much for being here with us. You could have been anywhere in the world, and you decided to join us for today, and we greatly appreciate it. Today, we have a wonderful, wonderful guest with us today. He is the famous Chuck Carroll, and he wears many, many hats. In fact, before we bring him on, he's wearing he's wearing a hat as we speak. But typically, I think he doesn't really wear a hat, but I'll ask him. Chuck is the host of Physicians Committee's most popular The Exam Room podcast, but he's also known as the weight loss champion. And it is a moniker that was given to him by the NFL player for losing an incredible 275 pounds. I cannot wait to dive deeper into that. But his story is not just amazing, but he also, because he's a podcast host, also interviewed a lot of great esteemed guests himself. I'm sure he would like it because, sometimes you wear a different hat, and then when you're a guest, it's also nice to kind of sit back a little bit. But we're going to dive deeper into his story and find out what's cooking and what's going on with him and see what we can find out. So without further ado, please welcome Chuck. Hey, Chuck.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here with us. I know you're a busy guy, and we appreciate your flexibility and patience for coming on, and we're really excited to dive deeper into your story.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. A couple things. Number one, was that a Jay-Z reference right up front? Were you taking the beginning of Izzo? You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. I appreciate that.
Well, you know what? That probably is without even knowing it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's cool. And then number two, thank you also. You're right. I typically don't wear a hat when I'm doing an interview, but in all honesty, I didn't feel like doing up my hair today, man.
Well, I appreciate the colors. At the time of this recording, we are in the week right before July 4th and, celebrating America. So, but yeah, I like it because you got the earrings going on, and, I wear glasses, but, the ones on my eyeballs, right? So, I appreciate, the look and, your candor and authenticity. You really come through as, a guest and also a host. And it's very rare because sometimes you can just read off of a script and be somewhat robotic. And I really appreciate when hosts, especially hosts, can really come through and elevate their voice, showcase their voice. And because it's a lot, behind a virtual screen in order to capture one's personality. So your authenticity definitely comes through.
That's my pleasure. And I love being on this side of the interview. So you fire away, man. And I have the easiest job in the world today. Thank you for making life easy.
All right. So for those of you, our audience that doesn't know you, it'll be kind of surprising if they didn't. But what is the origin story to you, right? Tell us a little bit about how you got to this point, right? I like to talk about the superhero origin story from point A to point B, and how you arrived to that moniker, to that name, right? Give us a snapshot of how you got and traveled to this far.
Oh man, it's funny. So this year will be 15. That marks my weight loss journey, that cliche term. But it is still a journey that feels as brand new as ever. Every morning I still wake up and I'm like, holy my God, I'm not 420 pounds anymore. Like, this is amazing. Like, let's go, giddy up, bring on the day. I just, to be honest with you, I just fell victim to the standard American diet at a very young age and have that addictive gene. A lot of us do. But man, it was like for me, food, that ultra processed, high fat food, drive through junk food, like I just got hooked on it and needed more and more and more over time. And as I began to eat more and started to hide the volume of food that I was eating, my waist got bigger and bigger and bigger. My confidence shrank smaller and smaller and smaller, but my health really eroded. I thought I was going to die, didn't think I was going to see 30, and there was nothing I could do to curb this addiction to, really, more than anything, fast food. We can get into restaurant specifics in a little bit if you would like. It nearly claimed my life, and I had to go to extreme measures to break this addiction. And then once I finally did, the funny thing is, they still don't tell you. Nobody does. Doctors or anybody else tells you really what it means to eat healthy. At least when you're going through the typical diet circles, and so you kind of have to fly blind. But then fate eventually intervened. Even after I had weight loss surgery, doc, like fate, eventually intervened as my weight was starting to creep back up slowly but surely. Finally, stumbled on a plant-based diet. Just confidence and everything exploded along the way. Start doing shows with NFL players, was given the nickname the weight loss champion by one of them in the locker room here in Washington DC, and the name stuck. And so now we're on season 7 of the Exam Room podcast and changing lives around the world, man. So that's the long and short of it.
Which NFL team was this?
So at the time it was under another name, but now it's the Commanders. So the Burgundy and Gold, grew up a huge fan, had to check that card when I began covering the team professionally for a little while. It was just, when somebody is like 6'6", 3 1/4, but all muscle, and I'm like 5'5", and they're like, we're going to call you the weight loss champion. You just go with it. You just go with it.
Right. Because both ends in a way took, like time and effort, right? Like I'm in front of patients all day long, and I told them that because, and we'll get into this a lot later with the whole advent of these new kids on the block in terms of weight loss medications, but I tell them it takes time for people to arrive at chronic disease. It wasn't overnight, but what's interesting is that they think the fix is, short and sweet, it's a shortcut. But they also need to understand, as well as is that also takes time, right? It's the long game, it's the marathon, not the sprint.
Yeah. And look, I mean, to that end, I don't care if a person has bariatric surgery. I don't care if they're using Wegovy, Ozempic, or if they're doing something as crazy as the grapefruit diet. At the end of the day, anybody can lose weight, right? But it's keeping it off, that long game that you were talking about, that is so critically important. And to the best of my knowledge and based off of my own experience, the only way to truly keep it off long term and then make this weight loss journey about so much more than just weight loss, checking the boxes for all of those chronic diseases that run rampant in so many of our families, that's by eating a healthy plant-based diet. And that's when you really reclaim your health and never have to worry about that scale going up again. That's really the freedom that I get more than anything with this plant-based diet. And I wish desperately more people would discover the same.
I would say desperate is probably the operative word because we're at a very critical time. And I feel like I've said this a lot over the years, but unfortunately, it just kind of gets worse every single year. Let's backtrack a little bit in terms of, you were at a much younger age. I think you didn't mention, but I read about that around 27 is where this whole peak, right? And you were like, fate hit you and you said to yourself, okay, I got to do something different. Now, you said that you fell victim to all the processedness that's surrounding, our environment. I think in the early 2000s, the food industry has catapulted to a peak so much that just floating everywhere that you see, anywhere, 2,000 extra calories for the average American, 2,000 extra calories. But let me backtrack for you and your family and your lineage, right? Because a lot of people think it's purely genetics. Oh, my father or mother or sister, they had diabetes, and my grandparents had diabetes or heart disease. So in a way, when they say it, it almost sounds like a cop out at saying like, I can't do anything about it. And I have no control over it. What was your family history like? Did they suffer through the same chronic disease as you?
Oh, 100%. We definitely struggle with our weight, especially on my father's side of the family, but even my mother's not immune to that. And, I never met my dad's dad. He died before I was even born. He kept having heart attacks, and then eventually one claimed his life about a year or so before I was born. And then on my mother's side, heart disease runs rampant there as well. My granddaddy, as I called him, had quadruple bypass, had his own fair share of heart attacks. My dad had a number of heart procedures. His ticker wasn't working well, and cancer, all of that stuff. It just runs crazy in the family. And so, of course, that was at the forefront of my mind. And, like all of that pops into your head, even at a young age when you're in your early 20s and you start to have these wild chest pains. And it's like that was their fate. And it's going to be yours too. But the thing was, it's like at least they were in their 50s when all of this stuff began happening to them. I'm still in my 20s. I'm on the heart attack superhighway, man. I've got the pedal to the metal and I'm just like flying down there toward an early grave. And that's not something that I was really excited about.
Right, right. It reminds me of, you said superhighway heart attack, and it makes me think of this. There's Burger Joint in Vegas. I don't know if you ever been to it before. It's in old downtown Vegas. I think it's called like Heart Attack Grill or something like
Yes,
that.
sir.
And they just touted, if you can eat, I guess, X amount of, either patties or burgers, that you get it for free or something like. It's these crazy ways of getting people to seemingly, right, try to achieve these types of milestones, right? And I even think about competitive eating, which is, physiologically a little bit different, but at the same time, it makes it seem like it's normal to ingest that much, even though you're not doing it at a competitive level. It's normal, right? Because on the back end, the food industry and their deep pockets and all the different types of food scientists have done very well in terms of, like you said, how do we make these foods more addictive and more addictive, when most people don't understand that the food industry, the food and beverage snacking industry specifically, is billions upon $1 billion industry. And their main goal is for you to keep buying, right? Because if you don't keep buying, they can't make a buck. So
100%, and a lot of people didn't realize that for a good number of years, the tobacco industry owned a lot of the biggest food companies out there and really deployed the same playbook that they had to get people addicted to cigarettes and get them hooked on nicotine. They employed the same daggone thing for all of these foods that are, so prominent on store shelves. It's incredible to me. And so you don't think that, somebody who quits smoking for a year thinks, we all know how it's going to turn out if somebody convinces themselves that they can just have one at a party and be a social smoker. The odds of that person actually being able to limit themselves to one cigarette from there on every once in a while are remote. We all know that person's going to be buying a pack of cigarettes the very next day. And yet, when we set out to go on these diets to lose 20 pounds, when we reach that goal, what do? The first thing we do is reintroduce those foods that made us need to lose weight in the first place, those foods that we get hooked on. And then, right after that, the next day, they're back at the drive-thru again. And then we play these mind games with ourselves. So it's like, well, I just had one slice of cake at the party. Okay, I didn't have ice cream. So I haven't had ice cream in a while. And the next day, instead of that cake, it's ice cream. And after that, it's a candy bar the next day. And after that, it's potato chips. And so it just goes on and on and on. And we play these mind games to say, well, a little bit won't hurt. But it all adds up over time.
Yeah. I think the biggest damage that we've done is really that statement, moderation is key, right? And that's probably the one statement that really gives us, I guess, leeway to really define that for ourselves, because that's not clear. moderation is not it's a very vague statement, right? So as a statement, oh, you just got to eat better and move more, right? Which
Yep.
in a way, we don't, most doctors that don't receive enough nutritional lifestyle education, they're not going to know much more than that beyond that statement, because it's easier to say, which is moderation is just, I do it every once in a blue moon. Whereas a blue moon could mean, every other day, save it for the weekend, or, you know what I'm saying? So it's a very damaging type of statement. And as a clinician, all or nothing is also very hard when we're doing behavior change and lifestyle change and teaching someone as well. So even if that's the case, I do tell them, like, yes, that's great. You're making steps in the right direction. However, we do have to understand, like you just said beautifully, is that it adds up, right? And I tell them that it's an accumulative effect, right? Your liver is not going to say, oh, it's better to save it on the weekend as opposed to drinking every day, right? Like, your liver's not going to know the difference, right?
Your liver does not carry a calendar. It doesn't know if it's Saturday, Sunday, Friday night, whatever. The liver doesn't care. The liver's just knowing that it's got to process a whole lot of garbage out of it, and it just, why even put the strain on your system, man? But you know what kills me? You know what I love to underscore this point when I'm giving talks at conferences and events. I put up brain scans of somebody using cocaine and somebody who's struggling with their weight eating a donut. And to see the way that the dopamine release, the pleasure centers in the brain light up identically, that really underscores the issue for people. And so when they realize that, I can kind of see it in their eyes. And then I draw that parallel about, well, it's ice cream one day, it's cake the next. And we play these games with ourselves saying, well, I haven't had that in so long. Except the brain really can't tell the difference between cake and ice cream. It just knows that there's fat and there's sugar in there, and it's going wild. And it loves it. And so you're really chasing that high no matter what your drug is, So it's just nuts to me. It's just nuts to me.
I was a guest on someone else's podcast, and I told them that, you know what, human beings didn't really, evolve that much, right? And what has accelerated and evolved much faster than us is culture and technology. And now we have AI now, right? And so we are being used, our evolutionary mechanisms are being used against us. And I think that's what most people don't understand, is that people are leveraging that, and it's hurting us at the end of the day. Chuck, I want to get back to the weight loss champion, right? And take us through the moments in time where, okay, I'm going to go through bariatric surgery. I had it. And a lot of people actually do regain the weight back. What were the moments or key events or maybe thoughts or processes that helped you to stay off of it, right? And to really keep the weight down? You had mentioned you stumbled into plant-based lifestyle. What was that? How did that happen?
Well, before I get there, I will tell you, I think that the single biggest key for me was an epiphany I had long before I knew about a plant-based diet, and even years before the bariatric surgery. I was working in a radio station in Washington, D.C. called Big 100.3, doggone near my heaviest ever, and I'm working at WBIG. Can't make this up. And they come to me and they offer me an endorsement to do the cookie diet. So I'm on board with this, right? I'm going to eat cookies, I'm going to lose weight, and I'm going to get paid for it. Sign me up. Well, I couldn't make it more than 3 days without going to Taco Bell, without freaking out. Like, I was so focused on Taco Bell that my mind just started to play tricks on me, and I started to feel really sick too, like I was coming down with something. Like, I didn't know it at the time, but I was going through detox. But I got so angry that I jumped up out of bed one day and I punched my fist through a wall because I wanted Taco Bell. And so I couldn't make it through another night without sneaking out to the 24-hour drive-through, loading up on my close to 5,000 calorie daily binge. And I thought, that was the plan. I would hide the evidence and I would just go to the gym to work it off. Well, what I wasn't counting on, and what I think in hindsight actually saved my life, was the epiphany that I had when I took that first bite. Number one, it was like all of that anger and that sickness went away. It was what I call the best antibiotic and antidepressant rolled into one that you could ever possibly think of. It was like instantaneous when I took the first bite. But then that was replaced by sadness because of what I realized in talking to people who had really struggled with drugs and alcohol. They said, when you relapse, that first hit is euphoric. You feel great. But then shortly thereafter, you are just so daggone sad and depressed because that's when the reality hits you that you have a problem and you are completely out of control. And even though I wasn't a heroin addict, I wasn't an alcoholic, I wasn't a cocaine user, I was experiencing the same type of emotion. It was a helpless feeling. And had I not had that epiphany that the brain reacts the same way to food as others had told me that it does to drugs and alcohol, I probably would not be here with you today. So after I had the weight loss surgery, I knew no matter what I did, I was never going to go back to another drive-through, and I haven't. It'll be 15 years this year. And so I don't even like to go into a fast food restaurant like when I'm traveling just to use the restroom. Like I just get a weird vibe. It's just But so I flash forward to when I was hosting the sports talk shows with football players, and we got approached, myself and a player by the name of Adam Carricker got approached to do this campaign called Teaming Up for Health from an organization called the Physicians Committee. And we didn't know a daggone thing about what being vegan meant. We didn't know if plant-based meant that you could still eat, eggs and drink milk, but we got a crash course on it. And I was really kind of moved by everything that we learned. And so when I eventually got burned out of doing sports and news, I just called up the Physicians Committee again and said, guys, do you have a podcast? I'd be really interested in working with you. And that's how the show came to fruition. And so over the course of the 7 years, every time I do an episode, I feel like I learn more and more and more and can fine tune my health a little bit more with every episode. So I'm learning, but that is really my introduction to going plant-based. It was just fate, serendipity, whatever it is you want to call it. It just happened. And I think somebody was looking out for me that day, man, because clearly it's worked out well.
Yeah, I love that. I've never heard of someone saying, okay, you've heard of sobriety, right? You've heard of, I've been sober from substance use or alcohol, right? I've never heard of someone said, 15 years, I've never walked into a fast food joint, right? So I love how things are reframed. And sometimes things hit someone or we receive information differently. It really depends on the speaker, the way they speak, the personality, the energy, and your own mood, and whether you're able to receive, whether you're ready for change and that open-mindedness, right? And so I love the fact that you framed it that way. I love the fact that you were mentioning about taking the 2 brain scans. I think they're MRIs you're speaking of, and what dopamine looks like in a cocaine user versus sugar, which I believe some studies show that it's actually more addictive than actual, cocaine. And so because it lights up the same centers, but actually hits more. And, it's very interesting. I would love to one day be able to sit down with more and more patients like yourself. I'm not saying you're a patient, but, be able to hear that phrase saying, yeah, it's been X amount of years that I've walked into a fast food joint or McDonald's or Jack in the Box or anything like that, because it really sets the tone. It really sets the tone in terms of where we are in terms of the state of health as Americans.
Absolutely. It takes a total shift in mindset and desire and a willingness to be able to just say no. I wish that more people viewed fast food and ultra processed food in that regard. And ultra processed food isn't really a term that gets thrown around in daily conversation. So I really don't even like to use it. So I'll just stick with junk food. But yeah, man, I hope that at some point we do have this great awakening that we have so much more control over our health than we realize. Because I certainly didn't realize that until about 7 years ago. And man, just what I know now completely makes me feel like we're all living in the Matrix. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, I would say, I don't know if you believe in chance or luck or serendipity, but for you, you stumbled right, on an event that gave you this eye-opening moment or series of moments to say, oh, let me kind of take a step back and question what I know. And then several moments later, you said, hey, let's host this thing. 7 years later, here you are, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing. For those of the millions of us that, for my perspective, being 100% clinician, what we face a lot is the tidal wave of mis and disinformation, right? Most people get their information either from Dr. Google or social media, right? So what would you say to the common layperson that doesn't have that type of serendipitous moment, that awakening, or arise to their primary care physician, and majority of us that didn't have, that didn't have that education, you work, and I would love for you to talk about PCRM a little bit more, but you work with esteemed colleagues, right? And you are yourself, and it's like overwhelming how much knowledge you have. But for the ones that go to their PCP, the primary care physician, doesn't that didn't receive that, right? What would you say to them? What can they do? Where should they look at? Where can they go?
So it's funny you say consulting Dr. Google. Dr. Google can either be, Mr. Jekyll or Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, right? It can work for you or it can work against you. And that's kind of the cool thing about the age that we live in, with so much information at our fingertips on the internet, is that you have the opportunity to fact check this. And I don't want you to go to Twitter to fact check the daggone thing. I want you to stay on Google, and I want for you to search for the studies that people talk about, not just the short little articles that people write up on their blogs or these posts on Instagram that promise quick fixes for anything, or even something that you hear about with your doctor. Hop on Google and look for the actual studies. Don't go to Google itself. Go to Google Scholar. All right. That's the easiest thing. That's just this incredible archive of published studies. And then look at these studies that maybe your doctor, your PCP was talking about with you. And then look at who funded them. If you think that it's crazy, if like somebody says to you, well, if you only eat meat, you're going to lose a bunch of weight, look up the references. Well, go look at that, right? Look at the authors of that study, Google their names, and then see who they're affiliated with. And there's also disclosures on a lot of these studies too. And a lot of times you'll see these studies that seem too good to be true, like eat red meat lowers cholesterol. Eating a dozen eggs doesn't affect cholesterol. These types of things, I guarantee you there's going to be a tie somewhere to the big industry, whether it be beef, dairy, whatever the case may be, that those dollars are the ones that funded the study. So the data has to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt. I'm lucky and didn't even realize this as a former news reporter in addition to sports. The Physicians Committee doesn't take a dime from any sort of food company, even if it's broccoli or pineapple or something like that. We cannot take a dime from it because our research has to be above reproach. We can't bring anything into question. It's like, yeah, well, of course they're saying broccoli's healthy because they were just paid by the broccoli farmers of America. No.
Yeah.
We won't take that. All of our money comes directly from independent donors, which is so important. And so follow the money. That's the phrase, follow the money. That's what I'm trying to tell you. But everybody has the ability to do that if you can hop online.
I think that's beautiful. And it's more simplistic because we're not going to know, like I'm going to, as a layperson, the common layperson is not going to know. They didn't go to medical school. They don't have a PhD in this type of research, medical informatics or medical research, right? So even if they arrive to these articles, it's probably gibberish to them. They're not going to know how to look for it. But following the money is a great way because a good study discloses, a good study tells you how it's funded. And a good study tells you, hey, this is what we've tried to reach our hypothesis and try to test this out. And a good study also tells you that, you know what, this could have been better and we could have done things differently. And usually we say we need to have better studies to improve upon this.
100%. 100%. And so if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, there's another site you can go to, PubMed, which is a great publicly available resource that you can look up these studies. You don't really even have to be able to interpret them because there's going to be a lot of confusing scientific stuff that goes over your head. And sometimes even I have to ask for a translation on some things. But then just go down to the disclosures or just start Googling people's names and you'll see those connections there. And then you can kind of draw your own conclusions. I'm kind of giving you a little bit of inside baseball there, but that's the easiest way to follow the money.
Hey guys, what's going on? This is Dr. Colin Zhu, and thank you so much for hopping on to this week's episode. Guys, it's 2024. What is your intention for this year? Who do you want to become, and how do you want to feel? Some of the things that you might be, looking to do is to lose weight. Some of you guys want to get out of your family history and genetics and not play victim to your medical and health destiny. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's very, very important to kind of look at some facts and figures. For weight loss, 71% of Americans are overweight and 40% are considered and classified as obese. And these numbers are continuously rising. A lot of these are associated with a lot of medical issues, arthritis, gallstone issues, heart disease, cholesterol, diabetes, cancer, and the list goes on. And also having and carrying extra weight increases your risk for COVID. Also, in terms of chronic disease, 60% of Americans carry one chronic disease, 40% two or more. Whenever I get a patient, it's usually a laundry list of medications that they are taking at the same time. Guys, if you are looking for a different and alternative solution, I've created a solution for you guys, and that's in the form of group coaching. If you want to be coached by us, Dr. Zhu, and our team members, me and my team, I've set up a beautiful 12-week, 3-month program that's going to be led by your own respective group coach, also led by me teaching you expert classes, and we teach you on what to eat, how to shop, what recipes to go for, where to navigate the supermarket, your pantry, your kitchen, and learning all about sustainable strategies on losing weight and preventing chronic disease. So if you want to learn more, click on the link below, and we would love to set up a breakthrough call with you guys to see if we are a mutual fit. And I want to be able to cheerlead and advocate you guys and be a support for your wellness journey. So click on the link, schedule a call. We'll see you guys on the next one, and enjoy the rest of this episode.
For sure. Now, let's shift gears in terms of the new kids on the block, all these weight loss medications, right? But before we even get to that, what would you say, because the weight loss industry is $1 billion, probably $1 trillion industry. Weight is not, weight, obesity, it's not something that we've encountered a lot in our American civilization. It started creeping up since the 70s, which is very interesting. People always thought that, it's been around for some time and, all this, right? But actually something happened in our food industry during that time. But to the common person that's trying to lose weight, what would you say are things you need to look out for, things you want to avoid? And obviously, obesity is a very complex condition. We deem it as a disease now. Back in the day, we didn't deem it as a disease. And it's very individualized, right? But what would you say to the person that's struggling with their weight or having, a challenge? What are some things to look for and avoid?
Well, the first thing I would say is, number one, it's not your fault. You may think it's your fault. It's not your fault. And it took me a while to understand what that actually meant when Dr. Barnard said that to me, literally on the first episode we ever taped. It is not, because again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, these foods have been engineered to get you hooked, which sounds like I shouldn't be wearing this hat, but instead one that's made of tin foil. But I'm telling you, as I'm sitting here, it is as true as the day is long. So number one, it's not your fault. Number two, forget your genes. I don't care if both of your grandfathers had heart disease. I don't care if your dad has heart disease. I don't care if cancer runs rampant in your family. The fact of the matter is you, only you, have control over your health. Think about the things that you inherit from your parents. It's not just your DNA. It's your lifestyle. It's the things that you eat. It's the recipes that have been handed down through the generations that are loaded with fat, loaded with salt, loaded with sugar, right? Think about that. And so then it's like, well, I know that if I limit my fat intake, I'm probably going to lose weight. Duh. No kidding. So guess what that is? That's control that you have. That's the easiest way to look at it. You have the power. Nobody who has done any sort of anything, major in terms of weight loss, none of the biggest losers, myself, any of us have lost a lot of weight, have any sort of superpower that you don't already have. In which case we're all Superman or Superwoman. We all have this power, but we have to unlock it. And the only way to do that is by rethinking what it is we're putting on our plate. Now, when you get to the point when you're desperate enough and you feel like you just can't take another single day trapped in this body that's so uncomfortable and it hurts to move, it hurts to breathe, you're on umpteen gajillion medications just to survive, I get that. And so you're going to turn to what you think is the next quick fix, whether it's surgery or Wegovy or Ozempic or anything like that. If you feel like you need that, this is where I differ from a lot of people in our community. If you feel like you need that, that's cool. But it's just a jump start. It is temporary, just like every other diet you have ever been on. At the end of the day, you have to change the way that you're eating and you have to change the way that you're living your life. If you don't do those two things, then your odds of having long-term success, achieving those health goals that you want so desperately are pretty slim. So if you need a little, jump start to get going, do it. I'm not here to judge you because I did it. But I'm telling you, if you look at the long-term success rates of anybody who's using these medications or have had bariatric surgery, you will see that over the years, that weight continues to climb back up. And a lot of people wind up heavier than they've ever been after the fact. So you can't escape the fact that you need to change the way you eat and change the way that you live.
I don't know if you know the original person that said this quote. I'm thinking it's Hippocrates. I'm not sure. But the quote goes like, in order to heal someone, they have to be willing to give up what makes them sick to begin with. I think it's Hippocrates, but I'm not sure. So I don't know if you ever heard of that quote.
No, but it's very wise.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll just say it's Hippocrates for now. It kind of sums up what you just said. I think a lot of people are unwilling to really just give up what they're comforted with, their lifestyle and how they just been doing for many, many years, but is also reinforced by what they saw from their predecessors and their ancestors. It's like trying to quit smoking, but you go back to the same circle of friends that continue to smoke. It's like, what is the likelihood you're going to succeed, right?
For sure.
So when I counsel and coach patients and clients on my own, it's really starting from the basics, and that's the home, the kitchen, the pantry, the fridge, the freezer, right? And this huge dichotomy of your health starts in the kitchen versus everywhere else outside of your home, which I call outsourcing your food. They're not there to look after your health. They're there to make a buck. So what does that mean? They're going to be cutting costs and using the lowest quality as ingredients. And I tell my patient, guess what? It goes into you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And look, I mean, I'm sure you use the got to put good gas in the car analogy. I mean, that's something
I love car analogies.
Literally everybody can understand, right? If you see something, if you're driving down the road and you see all of these gas stations and then you've come across one where the gas is $1.50 a gallon cheaper, like you're going to wonder, like, what's up with that gas? And if you pull into that gas station and you fill up your tank with that gas, there's a good chance your engine's going to start to sputter. No different with food. It's no different with food.
Yeah. Before we close out, and you and I could have a talk forever, can you tell us a little bit more about what you've learned about the fast food industry, the restaurant industry, like the behind the scenes? What are some common things that might not be so common for the average person, that predominantly that's where their meals come in? What do they need to know that you've learned over time?
Oh boy. Oh
Give it,
man.
give it to
I
us.
mean, geez
Give it to
Louise.
us, Chuck.
I mean, again, I feel like I need to go off camera, get my tinfoil hat, and then come sit back down. All right. So again, I will just preface this statement by saying I am a former news reporter and I take sourcing extremely seriously. I take accuracy very seriously, and I don't believe in injecting bias into any sort of information that's out there. What I wish people knew about the fast food industry, beyond the fact that big tobacco companies really used to own it, and their playbook, even though they've divested themselves of that, is still being used. I wish that people knew how much influence they have up on Capitol Hill here in Washington, D.C., in the upper reaches of the federal government, because that steers what our definition as a society of healthy is. And so, case in point, we at the Physicians Committee a number of years ago filed a Freedom of Information Act request and got gobs of records showing how the dairy industry communicates with the highest levels of government. And so these were really government plans that manifested themselves as some of the biggest fast food campaigns you have ever seen. Wendy's Summer of Cheese was a government-crafted campaign. Why? To get people to eat more cheese, to prop up the dairy industry, which had donated so generously to federal officials. All right. So also, there was another plan. How can we fit a pound of cheese on your pizza? Add more cheese to it. More and more and more cheese. Right now, we're seeing it with the campaign to get whole milk served back in school lunches. And there's this massive push to do it. It's called Whole Milk for Healthy Kids. And the thing is, whole milk is loaded in saturated fat. But if this bill passes, then it would exempt the saturated fat in whole milk from the fat totals that are put onto the school lunches. So say you can only have 10 grams of fat in school lunch. Now, I don't know what the exact number is, but the saturated fat from the whole milk would not count one iota against those saturated fat totals. That's coming from the government as well. And so, like, these are things that we have to keep in mind. Again, you're going to say, man, this guy Chuck, he's spitting conspiracy theories. The boy definitely needs to be wearing a tin hat. And I'm telling you, man, it's as real gets. And we have links up on our website, pcrm.org, so people can actually go back and look at a lot of these government documents. Like, it is mind-blowing, man. Mind-blowing. The New York Times actually did a beautiful write-up and cited a number of these documents as well. It's very real, but people just aren't talking about it, and they're certainly unaware, for the most part, that the stuff is happening.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, oh, oof. It's very sobering, to say the least. And especially because it's interesting, because I think adults, they would put more money in, or they have more time and attention towards their kids and towards their pets, right? Industry is like exploding for that. So when you're talking about someone's kids, I think it hits harder as opposed to when they're talking about themselves. They can just forego it. I'll be okay. And then, 5-10 years later, they've just become just very, very sick. But in terms of school, healthy lunches, healthy food for our kids, that's a very eye-opening and sobering set of facts and figures, especially when it's tied towards the government, especially when these industries have so much influence. And it just makes you say, what are we doing at the end of the day? When our own government cannot protect us, it's like, what do we do at the end of the day? So I'm really glad that you do what you do, lending your voice. I'm glad that, you're part of PCRM, which I would love for you to expound upon about that organization and the work of Dr. Neil Barnard. But I always say, wellness is a team sport, and it involves not just individuals, but all of us collaboratively working together to reinforce and to ignite this type of movement, right? Kind of like the positive effect of a wildfire.
Yeah.
So please enlighten us on what the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine is.
Yeah, oh man, it's just such a beautiful organization that's made up of just tens of thousands of doctor members as well as, patients, regular people such as myself who just believe that nutrition education should be at a premium. In addition, we have a wonderful arm of the organization that looks at ethical research so we can end a lot of animal suffering. That's a completely separate branch, but my focus is primarily on nutrition with the podcast and educating people, and that's where a lot of our time, our effort, and our energy goes, so that not only are we able to coach up ordinary people such as myself, but then we're also able to educate doctors such as yourself. Because what I learned also that just blew my mind is that there is little to no nutrition education in medical school. So we're working so hard to change that. Because imagine a world where the doctor is actually able to explain to the patient eloquently and correctly how to treat the root cause of the problem as opposed to just writing a prescription to treat the symptoms. What a beautiful world that would be. So we're working really hard to give people not just extra years to their life, but healthy years to their life. And that begins with education, or as the old NBC Saturday morning slogan was, the more you know. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, man. We're just trying to educate the world and make it a little bit healthier place.
Well, Chuck, I really, really appreciate, the work that you have been doing. Congratulations on 7 years, and here's to another 7 more years
Appreciate
to
it,
all
man.
this, And, like I said, it takes all of us with awareness, with the power of knowledge, but even more so with that is really action behind that knowledge and awareness. How can we implement change? Because like I was saying off camera, it's critical. It's critical where we're at. And we need even more concentrated and focused energy and effort. So Chuck, thank you so much for being here with us. Where can they find you in the podcast?
Oh man, we are all over Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is that you get your shows and your podcasts. Just look for The Exam Room by the Physicians Committee and give us a follow or subscribe, and then a nice 5-star rating. If you're really feeling generous, you like what you hear, give us that 5-star, and that really helps us grow in the podcast rankings. But final question for you, my friend, is when are you coming on The Exam Room? We got to go tit for tat here.
I'm ready whenever you are, my friend. So I can't wait. And, I would be honored. So I would be honored because this, it's a beautiful conversation, the work that you're doing, Dr. Bernard. And I would love to, even just for a speck in the pond to create that ripple effect. I'm ready.
All right, man. Well, let's throw that pebble then, man. Let's create that ripple effect. You're coming on. I'll have my people call your people.
Of course, of course. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening to another episode. If you like this, please like, subscribe, and comment. And if you felt that this was a benefit for someone else, please let them know. And until then, please say goodbye to Chuck Carroll. Bye.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoy that episode. If you like that, please like, comment, and subscribe. And please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. And if you felt that this was a benefit for someone else, please let them know. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating, and we greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next one.